are very excited to be joined by the godfather of lifestyle medicine, Dr. Dean Ornish. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. Thanks for having me. Really, really glad to be here with such good friends.
Absolutely. The man, the myth, the legend himself. Absolutely love it.
There's me. Right. No, good.
So if you're just joining us, we're expecting upwards of 400, maybe 500, maybe 600 people in the room today. So for those of you who are with us right now, thank you for showing up early. On your screen, you'll see a poll where you can vote for the type of diabetes you're living with, whether it's type 1, type 1.5, pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, or gestational diabetes. Or perhaps you don't even have diabetes and you're just here on behalf of a loved one, friend, or family member. So take a second and vote on that. And then also do us a favor. In the chat box, tell us where you are coming from. We always love to see where people are showing up from. And today's award goes to somebody from Ethiopia.
Ethiopia, wouldn't that be something?
If you're from Ethiopia, we will send you a free copy of Dr. Ornish's new book.
We're going to need a copy of your electricity bill. Information.
Yeah, we're going to need proof. Absolutely. Okay, looks like we got John Dill from Reading. How you doing, John? Peg from South Dakota. John from Portland. Rita's from Detroit. Keep them coming in. We got lots of Midwest here today, right now. We also have with us my beautiful wife, Kylie Buckner, in the background. Wave to everyone, Kylie. She's waving. We can't see her. She's in the background and she's answering a bunch of questions. I think we have also Jose in the background answering questions. So if at any point you guys have questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box. And we will also have a Q&A at the end where you can specifically ask Dr. Ornish any questions you might have about heart disease or diabetes. And we're going to do our best to get us to as many of those questions as possible today.
Absolutely. Also, you're going to want to stick with us because you're going to get a chance to call, put your number in, and we'll call you and you can talk to Dr. Ornish. Unique opportunity to do that. So you're going to want to stick around and hear the entire presentation.
100%. All right. What's that poll look like right now, Robbie?
So we have 43% of people living with type 2 diabetes, 15% pre-diabetes. And we have a strong type 1 group again, 7%. Love seeing that. The type 1's showing up. That's great. We have 22% that do not have diabetes. 11% a loved one has diabetes. There we go. So this is looking good. 0% with type 1.5 tonight. Those are pretty rare, but it's a good solid group here.
You know, I feel like finding people with type 1.5 diabetes is like finding a gorilla in the mist. It's like you find them and you're like, hey, what's up? I've heard about people like you. It's kind of cool to watch. Every once in a while they show up.
Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people that are just not being diagnosed properly. So there's definitely a lot of undiagnosed type 1.5s out there, and whenever they come across our path and we can help them, we're happy to.
100%. So we'll get started in just 1 second here. Robbie, have you seen anybody from Ethiopia today?
I have not seen anybody from Ethiopia. I see some San Francisco in here. That's good.
Pretty close.
Honolulu, Hawaii.
Not bad.
All right. I see some people coming in with questions already, so that's good. Ask your questions. We're going to make sure they get answered tonight. So keep being interactive. Ecuador. All right.
Not bad, not bad. Okay. So maybe we can get in. So we got a total of 305 people here right now, and we expect there to be a couple more 100 people showing up over the course of the next hour or so. So let's get into it. How you doing today, Dr. Ornish?
I'm good. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. This is a unique opportunity to be with you. Because I know you're a super busy guy, and just wrote a book recently, which we're going to go into detail about today. So there it is. Robbie's got it on the screen. UnDo It.
Great book.
It's thorough. I'm telling you guys, we're going to talk about it more later, but this is one of the best books on plant-based nutrition I've ever seen. It's really comprehensive, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, the whole picture.
Absolutely. All right. So Dr. Ornish, in case you may have never heard of him before, is the founder and the president of the nonprofit Preventative Medicine Research Institute, and he's a clinical professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco, which is the top medical school in the country. And he's also a clinical professor of medicine at the University of California, San Diego. He received his MD from the Baylor College of Medicine. He was a clinical fellow in medicine at Harvard Medical School. You may have heard of that school. And he completed an internship and residency in internal medicine at the Massachusetts General Hospital. He earned a BA in Humanities, summa cum laude from the University of Texas in Austin, and he actually gave the baccalaureate address. So that's a really fancy way of saying Dr. Ornish has a really big brain. He's incredibly smart, and he's got a lot of wisdom with over 40 years of experience under his belt to help share with us today. In addition to all of that, he was recognized as one of the 125 most extraordinary University of Texas alumni in the past 125 years by Time Magazine, and as a Time 100 innovator by Life Magazine, as one of the 50 most influential members of his generation, by People Magazine as one of the most interesting people of the year, and by Forbes Magazine as one of the world's 7 most powerful teachers after Robbie.
Guys, we're in the presence of a true legend tonight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Ornish, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks so much. It's great to be back. And, you know, awareness is always the first step in healing. So thanks for all the awareness that you're raising out there. It's really wonderful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So why don't you, I'll turn the screen over to you here. And why don't you tell our audience here, today we're going to be talking about how to reverse heart disease and how the same or similar lifestyle changes can actually help in reversing insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes at the same time. So feel free to take it over and educate everybody here in the room.
Well, thanks. The new book is called UnDo It, which I wrote with my wife and partner of 22 years, Anne. We called it UnDo It because my favorite key on the computer has always been the undo button. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had one in our lives? And in many ways now we do. I also called it that because my spiritual teacher for 40 years was a ecumenical teacher named Swami Satchidananda. And people say, what are you, a Hindu? He'd say, no, I'm an Undu. So he liked to make puns. So it harkens back to that as well. And it starts with a quote from Albert Einstein. It's one of my favorite all-time quotes, which says, in effect, if you can't make it simple, you don't understand it well enough. And as you indicated, I've been doing this work for over 40 years and have so much experience doing this and made so many mistakes along the way and learned from them. And what I learned is that, you know, I was trained like most doctors to view heart disease and type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes and high blood pressure and high cholesterol and prostate cancer and autoimmune diseases and Alzheimer's disease and so on as being fundamentally different diseases, different diagnoses, different treatments. But what I finally kind of clicked as I was actually writing this book was that they're not really different diseases. They're really the same disease manifesting and masquerading in different forms. And I say that because they all share the same underlying biological mechanisms, things like chronic inflammation, overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, changes in gene expression and telomeres, in angiogenesis and what's happening in your microbiome and so on. And each one of these mechanisms in turn is directly influenced by what we eat, how we respond to stress, how much exercise we get, and how much love and support we have. Or to reduce it even further, to eat well, move more, stress less, love more. Boom, that's it. And the more diseases we study and the more underlying mechanisms we look at, the more evidence we have to show why these changes are so powerful and how quickly people can get better. And I think our unique contribution has been to use these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art scientific measures to prove how powerful these very simple and low-tech and low-cost interventions can be. And one of the biggest obstacles that I've faced over the years, and I'm sure you hear the same thing, is that, oh, diet and lifestyle, that's kind of boring, you know, how powerful could that be, right? Give me a new drug or a new laser, a new recombinant DNA, a CRISPR-edited gene, whatever it is. That's really where the action is. But it turns out that these simple lifestyle changes really account for most of the chronic diseases that we have, for better and for worse. And one of the reasons why you often see that people have several what are called comorbidities or diseases at the same time, they'll have diabetes and high blood pressure and high cholesterol and be overweight and have heart disease and so on, again, is that they're the same disease, just manifesting in different forms. Or why entire cultures or countries, like in Asia 50 or 60 years ago, heart disease and diabetes and these chronic diseases were as rare as malaria is here. And yet in a couple of generations, they start to eat like us and live like us, and now all too often die like us. And they're, even though they have the same kind of genetic diversity, you know, even if you're not very efficient at, say, metabolizing fat or cholesterol or sugar in your diet, if you're not eating that much of it, it doesn't really matter. It only becomes a problem when people start to eat the excessive amounts of these that we find in Western cultures. And so it's radically simple in the sense is, you know, if you're talking about a personalized lifestyle intervention for a type of melanoma or a pancreatic cancer, that's awesome. But for the vast majority of chronic diseases, in all of our years of research, it wasn't like we found that there was one set of diet and lifestyle recommendations for reversing heart disease, a different one for type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure or high cholesterol or prostate cancer, whatever. We found it was the same for all of them. And we found for the first time that we could actually reverse heart disease. That, in fact, everything we're going to talk about today was thought impossible before we did studies on it. People thought it was impossible to reverse heart disease. And when I was 24, began my first study, and over a series of years, we showed that and conclusively proved that and published in, you know, the Lancet and the Journal of the American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine, and all the leading peer-reviewed journals. And that to me is part of the value of science, is to show people that there are new ways of doing things that actually work and empower them with new hope and new choices that they didn't have before. We found in these same lifestyle changes could reverse type 2 diabetes. You know, getting your blood sugar down with drugs doesn't work nearly as well as preventing the horrible complications of type 2 diabetes as getting it down with diet and lifestyle. You know, amputations and heart attacks and strokes and blindness and kidney failure and all these things that most of you are also all too familiar with. But studies have shown that in a number of studies, getting your blood sugar down with drugs doesn't really prevent those complications nearly as well as if you can get your hemoglobin A1C down with lifestyle changes alone. Then most of those horrible complications can be prevented at a fraction of the cost. And unlike most things that we do as doctors, the only side effects here are good ones. We found these same lifestyle changes could actually, we did a study with Dr. Peter Carroll, who's the chair of urology at UCSF, where I'm a professor, as you mentioned earlier, and Bill Fair, when he was the chair of urology at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And just to digress, when you're doing disruptive research, it's good to work with people who are considered at the top of their field, because then if you show that it works, then people tend to believe it. It's easier to get it published and so on. And we did a study with them where we found that men with early stage prostate cancer who made these same lifestyle changes could slow, stop, or even reverse the progression of the disease. Now, why that's important is that, first of all, prostate cancer is the most common cancer in men. And there's a convergence of forces that finally make lifestyle medicine the right idea at the right time after so many decades. The first is that the drugs and surgery approach to treating things like heart disease and diabetes and prostate cancer doesn't work nearly as well as people once thought. In the case of heart disease, there are now over 6 randomized trials that show that, for example, stents and angioplasties really don't work in men and women who have stable heart disease. They don't prolong life, prevent heart attacks, or even reduce angina. We talked about type 2 diabetes. Getting your blood sugar down with lifestyle works much better than drugs at preventing and in reversing type 2 diabetes. And in the case of people with early stage prostate cancer, it turns out that only maybe 1 out of 49 or 50 men who have early stage prostate cancer and who have surgery or radiation actually live longer. The other 49 or 48 often get maimed in the most personal ways because they're often either impotent, they can't have sex, or they're incontinent, they're wearing a diaper, for little, if any, benefit at huge economic and personal costs. And Dr. Carroll has developed, who's a very busy surgeon and one of the best on the planet, has developed algorithms to identify who is that 1 out of 49 or 50 men who actually benefits from surgery, who have the most aggressive form of the disease. And the others, instead of saying, well, just do watchful waiting or active surveillance, you know, which is really not doing anything, it doesn't prevent it, it just helps you find it sooner, is to make these same lifestyle changes and consider it a third alternative to either having surgery or radiation or doing nothing. It's an aggressive lifestyle intervention, which we found can slow, stop, or even reverse the progression of men with early stage prostate cancer. And by extension, in all likelihood, women with early stage breast cancer. We did a study that we published with Craig Venter, who was the first to decode the human genome. These same lifestyle changes change your genes, turning on the good genes that keep us healthy, turning off the bad genes that tend to cause prostate cancer, breast cancer, what are called the RAS oncogenes, and the same mechanisms that we talked about earlier, inflammation, oxidative stress, and so on, that create all these problems. We did a study with Elizabeth Blackburn, who got the Nobel Prize for her pioneering work with telomeres, the ends of our chromosomes that regulate aging. And it turns out that telomeres are like the plastic tips on the ends of our shoelaces, that as we get older, our telomeres get shorter. And as our telomeres get shorter, our lives get shorter. And the risk of premature death from pretty much everything goes up proportionate to that. We found for the first time that we could actually lengthen telomeres. And when we published this in the Lancet Oncology, the Lancet editors sent out a press release worldwide that called it Reversing Aging at a Cellular Level. We just began about 4 months ago the first randomized trial to see whether these same lifestyle changes can reverse the progression of men and women who have early Alzheimer's disease. And my mom died of Alzheimer's. It runs in my family, so I'm sure I have the gene for it. And there are no good drugs either for treating it or for preventing it. And yet I think we're at a place with Alzheimer's very similar to where we were with heart disease, that 40 years ago, that there's every reason to think it'll work. In other words, less intensive lifestyle interventions may slow the rate of progression. We think a more intensive one may actually stop or reverse it. And so stay tuned, we'll let you know. Medicare is now covering my program for reversing heart disease after 14 years of review. And so we're training hospitals and clinics and physician groups around the country. And we're getting bigger changes in lifestyle, better clinical outcomes, bigger cost savings, and better adherence than anyone's ever shown before. And because it's now reimbursable, it's sustainable. Earlier, we had trained a number of sites, 53 hospitals and clinics for our nonprofit institute. And again, we got the same outcomes, but a number of the sites closed down because we didn't have the reimbursement. And so the painful lesson was, it's, as the rappers would say, it's all about the Benjamins, it's all about the money. And now that Medicare is reimbursing it, most of the other insurance companies are. And if it's reimbursable, then it's sustainable. And if you change reimbursement, you change medical practice and even medical education. So we're really kind of co-creating a new paradigm of real healthcare rather than sick care. And it turns out that 5% of people account for 86%, up to 80% of the $3.6 trillion in healthcare costs that we have in this country every year. It's a huge amount of money. And many, if not most of those 86% of chronic diseases can be prevented or often even reversed by making these changes at a fraction of the cost. And so we can then make better care available to more people at lower costs, and the only side effects are good ones. And so I love doing this work because it's really empowering people, around the world now with new hope and new choices, not to blame, but to empower, because we realize we have so much more control over our lives and our health and our well-being than we had once realized. And if you want, we can talk more about what we've learned, that what enables people to make sustainable changes in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go a little bit into that, because I think there's a lot of people that understand that there are lifestyle changes that are going to make a big difference, but putting them into practice can be a little bit more challenging, especially amidst a really busy lifestyle.
Yeah.
With job, kids, work, school, you name it. So if you had to kind of give some pointers to our audience here for like the top 2 or 3 simple changes that they can make in their lifestyle today that are going to benefit them not only today but 20 years in the future, what would they be?
Well, how about 4? Eat well, move more, stress less, love more. Boom, that's it. So eat well is basically, to the degree you can move. Now, this book is really about reversing chronic diseases. It's the pound of cure. I wrote an earlier book called The Spectrum that was based on preventing disease, and it basically made the point that in all of our studies, we found the more you change your lifestyle, the more you improve at any age. And I had thought, incorrectly as it turned out, that the younger people with less severe disease would do better, but I was wrong. It wasn't how old or how sick they were. The more they changed, the more they improved at every measure we use and every disease we study. So if you indulge yourself one day, it doesn't mean you cheated or you're failed or you're bad. Just eat healthier the next. You don't have time to exercise one day, do a little more the next. You don't have time to meditate for an hour, do it for a minute. Whatever you do, there's a corresponding benefit. In the new book, UnDo It, it's really about reversing disease. And so it takes more to reverse disease. It's, again, the pound of cure as opposed to the ounce of prevention. That's why we were the first to prove you could reverse all these conditions in scientific studies, because most people didn't go far enough. And so Eat Well is really a whole foods, plant-based diet. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes in their natural forms, low in fat, low in sugar, low in refined carbs. What are you left with? Food as it comes in nature. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, soy, things of that sort. You can eat foods that are, you want to try to eat foods that they're organic if possible, because not only do they taste better, but they don't have as much of the insecticide residues that can often both disrupt hormones and lead to issues, and as well as being carcinogenic. You want to try to have 3 or 4 grams a day of some kind of omega-3 fatty acids, which you can get either in fish oil, or if you're vegan, in plant-based, algae-based omega-3s. Try to, what you include in your diet is as important as what you exclude. There are literally hundreds of thousands of substances in plant-based foods that have anti-cancer, anti-heart disease, anti-diabetes, or anti-aging properties. Things like phytochemicals, bioflavonoids, carotenoids, retinols, isoflavones, genistein, lycopene, on and on. And that's where you find them. On the other hand, after Eat Well, and by the way, the only diet that's actually been proven in randomized trials to reverse heart disease is the diet that we've been talking about. And the same is true for type 2 diabetes. Now, unfortunately, there's been a resurgence of things like the Atkins diet, the ketogenic diet, the paleo diet, which are all just different versions of the same thing. And I'd love to be able to tell you that those diets will reverse your conditions, but they don't. They make them worse. Now, one of the reasons why you can lose weight on these diets, and then sometimes even get your blood sugar, at least initially, under better control, is that most Americans eat way too many refined carbs: sugar, white flour, white rice, and so on. And when you go from a whole grains like a whole wheat flour to white flour, or from brown rice to white rice, you're refining or removing the fiber, and the fiber fills you up before you get to many calories, and it also slows the rate of absorption from your gut into your blood. So instead of getting, if you just eat sugar, it goes straight from your gut into your blood. It's like mainlining sugar. So your blood sugar spikes, your pancreas makes insulin to bring it back down, which is good. But the insulin tends to cause chronic inflammation and oxidative stress and these mechanisms that underlie so many different diseases. But whole grains don't do that. They fill you up before you get to many calories, and the fiber slows the rate of absorption. So instead of getting these wide swings, you get a nice constant level that doesn't get so high. And so people can lose weight initially on a Atkins or paleo or keto diet, because most Americans eat too many refined carbs and sugar, and by eating less of them, that's a good thing. But even better is to replace them not with bacon and pork rinds and sausage and things like that. And by the way, red meat is one of the most potent stimulants of insulin, believe it or not. It's not just sugar that does that. But to replace them with fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes in their natural forms, and then you not only can reduce your blood sugar even more, but you're enhancing your health rather than mortgaging it. In the book, I have a diagram from an article that Dr. Stephen Smith wrote in the New England Journal of Medicine, where he diagrammed what your arteries look like on 3 different diets. On a whole foods plant-based diet, like I recommend, the arteries are clean. There's, the blood's flowing through normally. On a standard American diet, which has the great acronym of SAD, they're partially clogged. And on an Atkins, keto, paleo diet, severely clogged, even if the risk factors like your weight and your triglycerides and even your blood sugar may go down temporarily, you're still mortgaging your health in the process. Whereas you can actually lose more weight and have an even greater reduction in your lipids and blood sugar and blood pressure by making these kinds of lifestyle changes. We found the average patient in our studies lost 24 pounds in the first year, and they kept over half that weight off just 5 years later. We found a 40% average reduction in LDL cholesterol. Many of the patients who were taking medication to reduce their blood sugar were able to reduce or get off under their doctor's supervision altogether, and thereby prevent all these horrible complications of type 2 diabetes. And so that's the Eat Well part. The Move More is, it's not surprising that exercise has great benefits for people with diabetes or for any chronic disease or even for depression. And by the way, in our studies, we found that depression scores were cut over in half. It's really actually better than you get with antidepressants like Prozac or Zoloft, but here again, the only side effects are good ones. And so if you...
I got a quick question for you.
Sure.
Before we go into the anxiety thing, because this is a big topic, let's go back to diet here for a second. So just like you explained, if you're eating a low carbohydrate or an Atkins or a paleo or ketogenic diet, which are all iterations of the same philosophy, you don't actually reverse the disease process. You make it worse. It's just harder to see.
That's right.
How can scientific studies get away with claiming that eating a ketogenic diet actually reverses type 2 diabetes? Because you see that all over the place.
Well, because they're measuring the wrong things. They're only measuring blood sugar or hemoglobin A1C. And as I mentioned, most Americans eat way too much sugar, way too many refined carbs. And this is where, I debated Dr. Atkins a number of times before he died, and his autopsy showed that which was publicly available, showed that he died of heart failure. That's the problem, is that you can get your blood sugar down temporarily because, eating less sugar and eating with fewer refined carbs is a good thing. We all agree on that. But even better is to eat less sugar and refined carbs and eat less animal protein and the so-called bad fats, because that's what clogs up your arteries. That's what, the most common harmful side effect, complication of diabetes is heart disease, as well as the ones we talked about earlier, blindness and amputations and heart disease and kidney failure and stroke and so on. And when you reduce not only your refined carbs, but also the animal protein, you're reducing you're not only not mortgaging your health, but you're actually enhancing it. And there's more and more research coming out that we need to get past this whole fat versus carbs debate. One study showed that people who eat a lot of animal protein have a 75% increased risk of premature death from all causes, and a 400 to a 500% increased risk of premature death from type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and the most common forms of cancer, prostate, breast, and colon cancer. So here again, you can get the benefits of a keto or a paleo or an Atkins diet, but you can get even more improvement, and you're enhancing your health rather than harming it in the process.
Got it. Okay, that makes perfect sense. So, yeah, you're right. When I read these scientific papers that claim that they reverse type 2 diabetes, there's one paper that comes to mind by a company called Virta Health, in which they say that patients started with an A1C greater than 6.5%, and they claim that a reversal of type 2 diabetes is dropping your A1C less than 6.4%, even if you're still taking metformin. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. They're sort of just making up these criteria, right?
Well, follow the money. I mean, it's, if I went out and said, I've been wrong all these 40 years, ham and bacon and sausage are really good for you, I'm sure I'd sell a ton of books, and
absolutely
money, but it just happens not to be true.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's go on to tenet number 2. So we got eat well out of the way. Now we got move more.
Move more is, if you like it, you'll do it. We all know that exercise is good for us, but if you find a way to incorporate it into your daily life, then you're much more likely to do it. So, simple things, take the stairs when you can. Buy a portable phone so you can walk around your office while you're talking. There's a new meme that sitting is the new smoking, because just sitting for more than 30 minutes at a time increases your risk of lots of bad things happening, including type 2 diabetes. I used to get up stressed out when I couldn't find a parking place near the gym. And I thought one day, I said, that's ridiculous. Just park a little farther away. You'll find a spot and get a little bit of extra exercise in the process. Walking a half an hour a day, not even all that fast or even all at once, gives you most of the health benefits. If you can put some strength resistance training and some stretching into that, even better. So if you like it, you'll do it. It's not like you have to do one kind of exercise for diabetes and another kind for heart disease or Alzheimer's. Again, because it's all affecting the same underlying biological mechanisms. And by the way, these are so much more dynamic than we had once realized. You can show improvements in hours when people make big enough changes in lifestyle. We'll talk more about why these big changes are sometimes easier to make and more sustainable than small ones, even though that's counterintuitive, or even more than taking a pill. The third, after eat well and move more, is stress less. And we know that the stress comes not simply from what we do, but more importantly from how we react to what we do. And you can have two people in the same environment. One is managing stress better. In fact, Dr. Blackburn did a wonderful study with Alyssa Epple where they looked at people who are under chronic emotional stress because they were taking care of kids with autism or parents with Alzheimer's. And they found the more stress they felt, and the longer they felt stressed, the shorter their telomeres were. And when they compared the high stress and the low stress women, they found there was a 9 to 17 year shortening in their lifespan in the stressed women compared to the unstressed women. That's huge. But here's the really even more amazing part to me, which is that there wasn't you can have two women in the same situations, but one of them was managing it better. It wasn't an objective measure of stress. It was the women's perception of it that determined how it affected their telomeres, even on a cellular level. And if women were doing the kinds of things that I write about in my new book, they were meditating, they had love and support, they were eating healthfully, they were exercising, they could buffer the effects of the stress so it didn't affect them, it didn't affect their telomeres. And so, people often think I have to choose between leading an interesting, productive life that's filled with stress and I die early, or I sit under a tree and watch my life go by. That isn't a choice at all, because the stress comes not from what you do, but how you react to what you do. And people often say things to me like, I used to have a short fuse and I'd explode easily when things got really stressful. But now that I've been doing the kinds of things on your program, my fuse is longer. I can be in the same job, the same family, the same environment, the same school, and I just react differently. Things don't get to me as much. And then I can paradoxically accomplish even more because I'm more centered and I'm not so easily distracted and buffered around by the stresses. And the fourth is love more, which is my favorite. Study after study have shown that people who are lonely and depressed are 3 to 10 times more likely to get sick and die prematurely of virtually all causes when compared to those who have a strong sense of love and connection and community. And I don't know anything in medicine that has that powerful an impact, even smoking, for example. And also it impacts our behaviors as well. 50 or 60 years ago, most people had a community. They had an extended family that they saw regularly. They had a job that they'd been at for a decade or more, where they got to know their fellow coworkers. They had a neighborhood with 2 or 3 generations of people living together. They had a church or a synagogue or a mosque or a club or something that they gathered together at on a regular basis. And many people today don't have any of those. And one of the studies that I cite in my new book, the UnDo It book, is that the more time you spend on Facebook, the more depressed you are, because it's not a real community. It's a fake community. It's not an authentic community. And by that I mean that it looks like everybody has this perfect life but you, because most people don't post their demons. They don't post their dark thoughts. They don't post when they were depressed or the problems they're having with their kids or their family or their spouse or whatever. Whereas if you grow up in a family with 2 or 3 generations of people living together, they know you. They don't just know your Facebook profile. Or these nice things that you said about me at the beginning of this interview, your bio sketch. They know you. It's like, I see you. I see where you messed up. I see where you broke that window, or you got addicted to something, or you were whatever, you got arrested, and I'm still there for you. And there's just something that we humans have a primal need for connection and love and community and empathy. And so anything that brings us together is really healing. Even the word healing comes from the root to make whole. Yoga comes from the Sanskrit, to yoke, to unite, union. These are really old ideas that we're rediscovering. And so anything that creates a sense of love and connection and community is really one of the most healthy things that you can do. And so realizing that, then we can kind of reprioritize things. Instead of thinking that the time that we spend with our friends and our families are the luxury that you do after you've done all the important stuff, you realize this is the important stuff, and I need to spend more time doing that. And we can see that meditation, for example, is more than just a way of managing stress or lengthening your focus, as we talked about earlier. What it does is it quiets down our mind and body to experience more of an inner sense of peace and joy and well-being, and to realize that's really our natural state. Now, I was trained as a doctor, and I'm sure most people are, grow up in this culture thinking that our health is something we get outside ourselves. Our happiness and peace of mind and joy are things that we have to get. And once you set up that view of the world, if only I had more whatever, what I'm lacking, more money, more power, more sex, more beauty, more accomplishment, whatever it happens to be, if only I had this, then I'd be happy. Then, however, it turns out you generally feel bad, because until you get it, you feel stressed. If someone else gets it and you don't, then you feel really stressed, and it kind of reinforces this misperception that we live in a zero-sum game world, and the more you get, the less there is for me, and you better get it while you can. And even if you get it, it's very seductive in the moment. It's like, I got it, I'm happy. But it doesn't usually last. It's usually followed by either now what, it's never enough, or so what, big deal, it doesn't provide the lasting meaning and joy that I thought it would. And people say things like, I can't even enjoy the view from the mountain I've climbed. I'm already looking over the next one. Or the letdown that comes from accomplishing a goal is so great, I make sure I've got, a dozen projects going at the same time. So what we're trying to do in our program is to treat the cause instead of just literally or figuratively bypassing it. And to me, in my limited understanding, that the cause is this misperception that we are separate and only separate, and we have to get these things to be happy, as opposed to saying I'm fine and I'm defining myself by thinking I've got to get all these things. My teacher used to say that it's a little bit like an old style movie projector with the light going through the movie film as it's going through there. And it projects these wonderful dramas on the screen, which we can enjoy, but we can only really enjoy them if we see that there's the light behind that double vision, that on one level we're separate, on another level, a part of something larger that connects us. And some people get to that state through doing psychedelics, or they do it through meditation or yoga or prayer or spiritual practices or just the direct experience. And to me, that's where healing occurs at its deepest levels, that all these spiritual truths of love and compassion and altruism and empathy are really the pathway so that we can heal that split. When we forgive someone for doing something bad to us, for example, it doesn't excuse or condone what they did, but it frees us from the suffering, because it turns out that the emotion that's most strongly linked with heart disease and most chronic diseases is chronic anger and hostility for ourselves and for others. And when we can reconnect with our own inner sense of love and well-being and have more love for ourselves, then we have that much more love to give other people. You know, when we forgive other people, we can learn to have that same kind of compassion for ourselves. And more than anything, then we're more likely to make and choose lifestyle choices that are life enhancing, as opposed to saying, gosh, I've got 20 friends in this pack of cigarettes and they're always there for me. Nobody else is. You're going to take on my 20 friends. What are you going to give me? Or, food fills that void, or fat coats my nerves and numbs the pain, or opioids numb the pain, or alcohol numbs the pain, or working all the time numbs the pain, or video games, or whatever. To say, look, the pain's not the problem. The pain's the messenger. It's saying, hey, listen up, pay attention. You're not doing something that's in your best interest. And when we work at that level, we can find that people are much more likely to make sustainable changes, because, and just the act of choosing, not to eat certain foods, for example, is that deprivation? Well, it can be, but all spiritual paths and traditions just about have dietary guidelines. They're often even in conflict with each other. But to me, whatever the intrinsic benefit is of those dietary guidelines, just the act of saying, I'm not going to eat certain foods, imbues those choices with meaning. When I was in college, I got suicidally depressed. I came about that close to killing myself. And that was actually my doorway into learning about all this stuff that really transformed my life and now the lives of many other people. But that sense of separation is really at the root of so many of these diseases. And so when we realize that we can take all the meaning out of life, which is what I did when I was so suicidally depressed, who cares, what matters, why bother, all the nihilistic questions. I learned that we can take meaning out of things, but we can also put it back in. We can imbue our choices with meaning. I often ask patients, why do you want to change your lifestyle? They say, well, I want to live longer. It's like, well, why do you want to live longer? I mean, if you told me, or anyone who's really depressed, when I was suicidally depressed, 40 years ago, that I was going to live longer if I just made these changes, I'd say, excuse me, you don't get it. I'm just trying to get through the day. I don't know if I want to live longer. Dead people look kind of peaceful. Maybe that's a better thing to do. And so when we learn that this is how people often cope with their pain, that the information is important, but it's not usually sufficient. I mean, we're drowning in information. It's not like you tell somebody who smokes, oh, well, did you know smoking is bad for you? They go, oh, I didn't know that. I mean, like it's on every pack of cigarettes. Everybody knows it's bad. We have to work at a deeper level. Or even being in a committed monogamous relationship. When I decided not to kill myself, I said, I'm going to lead a messy life. I need to know what's true. I don't know who to believe. I don't know what's real. And so I decided to, if it's not going to kill me or permanently damage me or hurt someone else, I'm going to try as many different things as I can. And because out of that, I'll know it's real. And, when people are dying, as I became a doctor later and dealt with people on their deathbeds, most people don't regret what they did. They generally regret what they didn't do. Because if you do something and it doesn't work out, then you learn something really important. And there's a lot of wisdom that comes from making mistakes. But if you don't do it, then you just wonder and you have regret. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do all this stuff. And I've done a lot of things that might surprise you. And I've made a huge amount of mistakes and learned a lot from that. And one of the things I learned is that, by being with my wife, Ann, in a committed monogamous relationship, is that the ball and chain? Well, it can be. But for us, you can only be intimate with someone to the degree you can be vulnerable and open your heart to them. Because and you can only do that to the degree you feel safe. Because, when you're vulnerable, you can get hurt. And we've all experienced that. It's like the heart shuts down. But if with two people decide to say, we are to be together forever, no matter what happens, I'm here. And so just taking divorce off the table here. So what can we do? So that sense of safety enables us to continue to open our hearts more and more and more. It's like the layers of an onion. It's thousands and infinite, really, layers of intimacy. And the more intimate we become, the more erotic it becomes, the more fun it becomes, the more pleasurable it becomes. I had no idea. And so instead of Ramakrishna was an Indian sage 100 years ago who talked about you can dig a lot of shallow wells and never reach water. You can dig one deep one and reach the wellspring. And so instead of having the same kind of erotic experiences with different people, I found that with this one person, with my wife Anne and partner of now 22 years, that we end up having these infinitely pleasurable and variable experiences. It's kind of like, great art, great science, great music comes from approaching it with beginner's mind without preconceptions. And the same applies to when we have a date with each other. We just to say, look, we're not trying to recreate an experience we had before, however pleasurable or wonderful it might have been. We're just going to come together and be open to all possibilities, all degrees of freedom. And then it surprises you because by definition, if you want something to be innovative instead of imitative, you don't know what you're going to find, And so if you're open to all possibilities instead of just trying to recreate something which is inherently imitative, if you just say, I'm just going to be open to what, I trust you, I trust our relationship, I feel secure in it enough to be open to whatever happens, then it's just mind-blowing and it makes it so much more fun. And I'm sorry nobody ever told me that when I was younger, but again, I came to that place through so many other pathways and learned that, well, that was fun, but it wasn't that fun, and this is really fun. So, and then likewise, because these underlying biological mechanisms are so dynamic, people start to connect the dots between what they eat and how they feel. It's like, oh, when I eat this, I feel good. I think more clearly, I have energy, I better sex, I smell better, I look better, I taste better. I eat this, I don't feel so good. I feel tired and sluggish. People have heart disease, their chest pain comes back. When they go and eat healthily and do these other things, their chest pain usually goes away. They're angina. So they can make love with their spouse, they can play with their kids, they can go back to work, they can walk across the street without getting chest pain. One of the patients that I talk about in the first chapter of the book is a doctor himself who had such a massive heart attack that his heart was barely pumping. His ejection fraction, which was the percentage of blood pumped with each beat, was only like 11 to 15%. Normally it's over 50 to 60%. And he was told that the only thing that could save him would be a heart transplant. And so, as I mentioned before, Medicare is covering my program in hospitals around the country, including one in Los Angeles at UCLA. So he went through our 9-week program there to get in better shape for the heart transplant. But his heart disease improved so much in 9 weeks that he didn't need a heart transplant. So you tell me, what's the more radical intervention, a heart transplant or, eat well, move more, stress less, love more? And it shows again how powerful these simple changes are. We tend to think it has to be something really, high tech and expensive, but these low tech, low cost, freely available interventions are really the ones that are the most powerful, not only in living longer, but in living better and feeling better.
This is very powerful stuff, Dr. Ornish. We have, I wish we could just have you just keep talking all night long. I mean, this is fantastic, but I do want to tell people, obviously we can't stay here all night. They got to pick up your book. If they want to hear they'll hear your voice as they're reading the book, because they talk to you today. Pick up the book. We're going to put a little box on the screen so you can click a button to go there.
Thank you. And Audible, if you really want to hear my voice, there's an Audible version of that as well.
There you go. Perfect.
Do you actually you read your own book?
You read it?
I did, and so did my wife on her sections.
That's fantastic. I love it.
She has a great voice, by the way. Yeah. Everything about her is beautiful. And she's as beautiful, brilliant as she is beautiful.
That's wonderful.
Actually, one thing that I've been meaning to ask you for years that just dawned on me as you were talking is you talk a lot about spirituality, and you're unique in that respect because there's not that many people in the whole food plant-based world who actually do incorporate and talk about spirituality in their education. So, what does your spirituality / mindfulness practice look like on a daily basis?
Well, first of all, just eating a plant-based diet is a spiritual act. It's so easy to get overwhelmed by, what can I do as one person to feed the hungry or help with global warming, or, reduce healthcare costs. And something as primal as what we put in our mouths every day can actually affect all of those. As you know, it takes 14 times more resources to make a pound of meat-based protein than plant-based protein. I was shocked when I heard that 1 out of 5 kids in the San Francisco Bay Area goes to bed hungry every night. That's just pitiful. It's not excusable. But if more people move towards a plant-based diet, even a meatless Monday, it frees up a lot more resources. There's enough food to feed everybody. That's why I went on the board of the San Francisco Food Bank, because I said, I want to see what we can do to make a difference. And I learned that this is where people can make the biggest difference. And again, just as I talked about earlier, you can imbue your life choices with meaning by depending on what you do. Instead of taking the meaning out, if I say, I'm eating a veggie burger today instead of a cheeseburger, because first of all, it's going to help me, but it's also going to free up more resources to feed the hungry, then that makes it more sustainable. If it's meaningful, it's sustainable. The second thing, it turns out, as you know, that more global warming is caused by livestock consumption than all forms of transportation combined. And, I used to get in friendly debates with Al Gore about this. And, he became a vegan about 6 years ago, even though he's a cattle rancher, not just because of me, but because he saw the same data that I saw and realized that's really where the action is. And it turns out that 86% of the $3.6 trillion we spent last year on healthcare costs, which is really for the most part sick care costs, are for treating chronic diseases like diabetes and others that are often preventable or even reversible through changing lifestyle. The EPIC study in Europe showed that 93% of diabetes was preventable by just, walking a half an hour a day, eating a reasonably healthy diet, not smoking, and so on. That's 93%, and yet half of the population today is diabetic or pre-diabetic in the U.S. at a cost of over $322 billion last year. So these simple changes can make a really powerful difference, and they are spiritual practices. I usually get up around 6 o'clock and meditate for an hour before the rest of the family gets up at 7. Sometimes our dog will come downstairs and sit next to me, which makes it fun. And it just sets a tone. But sometimes I get busy. Sometimes I don't have an hour. They'll say, well, do I have a minute? Even a minute has benefits, because it's like if you hear a song on the radio and you find yourself humming it later in the day. If you meditate for a minute, it kind of makes your fuse longer throughout the day. But when you take it deeper, it gives you that direct experience of inner peace. But if you take it deeper still, it gives you that direct experience of transcendence, which is to me where healing is the most powerful. And so, what we're seeing in our culture now is the demonization of the other. Those Mexican rapists, those Muslim terrorists, unfortunately coming from the White House. Once you define someone as being separate and only separate, the other, then you can do bad things to them because they're not you. But what the spiritual practice is, whatever pathway you get to them, and my teacher used to say, truth is one, paths are many. Find a spiritual path and go down it. Whatever it is, it'll take you, if you take it far enough, you'll end up in the same place. And you'll end up in that place of love and compassion, that you realize that double vision, that yes, on one level we are separate, but on another level we're part of something larger that connects us all. And even to give it a name is to kind of reduce what's really an infinite or ineffable experience, but you can experience it. And then love and compassion and what Aldous Huxley referred to as the perennial philosophy really is just a logical outgrowth of those direct experiences of compassion. When Nelson Mandela was released from prison after 16 years, however long he was there, he was saying, in his long walk to freedom, he said, do you hate your jailers? He said, well, they took away the best years of my life, but if I hate them, then I'm still in prison in my heart. And that's what we realize, is that when someone hurts you, and you forgive them, it doesn't excuse or condone what they did, but it frees you from the anger and the hostility that ultimately are so toxic to us. It's the old thing, you point your finger at someone, you've got 3 fingers pointing back, and you put out the one emotion that's consistently linked, as I mentioned earlier, with harm to our bodies and to our spirit, is chronic anger and hostility towards ourselves and others. Do I have time to just share with you one story that I almost never talk about that might be of interest in this regard?
100%. Go for it.
Okay. Years ago, let's see, what time is it now? Look at my thing. It's okay. We've got about, I'll condense. I'll give you the 5-minute version of this, and then maybe we'll stop. And we can come back and do more Q&A if you want. I'm happy to do that.
Sure.
When I was a first-year medical student back in 1975, a long time ago, 44 years ago, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had done a lot of pioneering work on death and dying. And, she's the one who developed the 5 stages of death, denial and anger, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, well, I'm not going to learn much about death and dying in medical school, but I know I'm going to have to deal with it. So let me go to this 5-day workshop she had. So I went there. And I was the only medical student. There were some nurses and ministers and so on, and psychologists. And to my great surprise, instead of having this lecture on how to deal with death and dying, she had people kind of hitting this rubber, with this rubber radiator hose, this mat and this phone book, and kind of shredding the phone book. And her idea was that if you're trying to deal with people who are dying, it will invariably bring up your own fears of death and your own unresolved issues around it. And so by getting people to kind of act out their anger and their fear, then they would come to terms with it, and then they'd be in better shape to help other people deal with theirs. So having already gone through my suicidal experience and being very familiar with my own demons, I decided that I would just kind of be the observer for the first 4 days. And it was really kind of just great theater in some ways, because you see all these kind of mild-mannered people, and then suddenly they're at the mat, and it's like helter-skelter, it's like Charles Manson, just you could really feel the energy there. And it was kind of interesting to me, but I thought, well, I don't need to do this. I'm pretty in touch with my dark side already. On the very last morning, it was a Sunday morning, my little inner voice, which, by the way, one of the great things about doing meditation on a regular basis is it gets you in touch with that little inner voice, that inner Swami, that inner Guru, that inner God, whatever name you want to give to it, the one that speaks very clearly but very quietly and gets drowned out by the chatter of everyday life. That's where all the studies that I've done, that's where the inspiration came from. And you can access it very intentionally. But anyway, that little voice said, Dean, you need to do this. And I said, I don't need to do this. He goes, yeah, you need to do this. I said, all right. So I went to the mat, and I started to hit it. I just couldn't get into it at all. And so Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said, well, you've got a good imagination. Why don't you imagine you're hitting somebody? And I said, well, there's nobody I want to hit, like a little halo around my head, And they said, well, think of anybody that you have some issues with. So one by one, I went through my parents and my siblings and my ex-girlfriend and, anybody I thought who had betrayed my trust and done bad things to me for whatever reason. And I did this for like 20 minutes, and I do have a good imagination. In my imagination, I would like hit them with this rubber hose, and they'd kind of be shocked, and then they'd fight back, and I'd overcome them and overpower them, and then go on to the next person. And I did this for like 20 minutes or so, and I was dripping in sweat, and my hand had blisters, and I thought, well, this is really interesting. I did learn something, but it wasn't what I thought I would learn. I learned that when you engage in that kind of anger and hostility, it's not really a catharsis. It really just intensifies the anger. I just felt worse rather than better at the end of it. I thought, well, that's a good lesson too. And I thought, okay, well, I'm done. Thank you. She said, well, I don't think you're done. And I said, well, I'm done. Trust me. There's nobody else I can beat up. I've gone through everybody. She said, no. And she was very intuitive. And she said, I think you've left somebody out. I thought, who did I have left out? I thought, the Swami that I've been studying with all those years. And I flashed to this lecture he'd given in, I guess it was in Chicago or someplace, where he talked about the man who found God through pure hatred of God, which we don't really have anything in Western tradition. But the idea was that the purity of the feeling will ultimately take you down that path, whether it's positive or negative. It's only when you're kind of neither here nor there that you kind of get stuck and don't go anywhere. So I thought, okay, let's see if this is true. So I thought, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it 100%. So I imagine him standing before me, and he looks like a kind of a central casting's idea of a Swami with long gray beard and orange saffron robes and so on. And unlike everyone, he just stood in front of me with his arms outstretched and let me hit him. So I started hitting him around the legs, and he didn't fight back. He just let me hit him, and that just at the time made me madder. I thought, oh, so you're being the Swami now, And so I know this sounds terrible, but again, this is all just in my imagination. So I thought, if I'm going to do it, let's just do it all the way. So I looked up at his face, and I was planning to hit him across the face with his rubber hose in my mind, and I could see these tears coming down his face. And they weren't tears of like I was physically hurting him with his rubber hose. I could hear him say, without a hint of being patronizing, you poor ignorant boy, you just don't know what you're doing. With just pure, I can only describe it as pure compassion. And in that moment, I get choked up just thinking about it now. In that moment, I instantly, I thought, whoa, here I am showing the darkest part of myself, and I'm only getting light back. And the light really drives out the darkness. And if someone else can have that kind of compassion on my own darkness, maybe I can have compassion on my own darkness, my own shortcomings, my own failings. And if I can have that in that same instant, if I can have that same compassion for myself, maybe I can have it for others. It was kind of like in Christianity when they talk about Jesus, being nailed up on the cross, saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It was my own direct experience of that through the Swami. And so that to me is where healing is the most profound, when we can have that same kind of compassion, and not only when we can love ourselves and have that kind of compassion on our own darkness and shine a light in that, then we have that much more love to give other people. And when we can shine a light on their ignorance and their darkness, it frees all of us. And that to me is what our world needs more than anything. And so, yeah, we can live longer if we eat a healthy diet. That's nice, but to what end? To me, the questions we need to keep asking are, why do we asking ourselves, which my wife does so eloquently, are why do we want to live longer? What is the meaning of life? What is our purpose here? How can we live a more loving life as opposed to demonizing the other and all the horrible things that come from it?
Yeah, I think that's actually it's a good point because like you said earlier, you might encourage people to live a longer life, but if somebody doesn't have a reason to want to live a longer life, then it's not a very compelling sell. And so it's more important to get to the root cause of why. Is it something you're actually looking for? Where's the happiness? Where's the fulfillment in your life? If it doesn't exist, let's create it. And then once it's there, you're going to probably want to. So, yeah, I think
that's the news from Lake Wobegon. I think we've used up our time, but I'm sorry we didn't get to more questions, but I promise let's do this again in the next few weeks, maybe in June or sometime.
Okay,
And we'll make the whole thing Q&A, and that way we can make sure everybody's questions get answered.
Can I get one question here in for you? Because there's a number of questions that have been coming through the chat box the entire time, and one that kept on recurring over and over for the 425 people that are here is about weight gain versus weight loss. So there's a lot of people in our audience that are already eating a whole food plant-based diet. They've seen you hundreds of times. They've seen Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Joel Furman. They've seen us talk about it, and they're following the methodology, and they're doing a great job. And I think a lot of people end up losing weight, and then at a certain point, they either plateau and they stop in their weight loss, or some people actually gain weight. They don't understand. They're saying, I'm doing everything you're telling me, but yet I'm gaining weight. Have you heard this before? / what type of advice might you give to somebody if they're in that situation?
Well, in our studies, we find that people lose weight and they generally keep it off. And they come down to what they're close to their ideal body weight is, and then they just plateau at that point, which is what you want. You don't want to keep losing weight, obviously, you'll just wither away, but you come down to something approaching an ideal body weight. But, you can eat a vegan diet that's not very healthy. I mean, Twinkies are vegan. Dr. Pepper is vegan, And so a lot of times, in the name of eating a plant-based diet, they're getting too much sugar and too much fat. The fat is the problem because fat has 9 calories per gram and protein and carbs have only 4. So when you eat less fat, you're eating fewer calories, but the same volume of food, and it's the volume of food that fills you up. 1 tablespoon of oil is 100% fat. It has about 130 calories because it's 9 calories per gram. So people think, olive oil is good for me. They pour it on their food. They dip their bread in it. They think, avocados are plant-based. I'll eat just tons of those. But they're 80% fat, so they have tons of calories in them. And likewise, people eat way too much sugar. But they'll say, well, I'm vegan, so that I can eat sugar. That's plant-based. But it's, it not only gives you all these calories that don't fill you up, but it, as we talked about earlier, it goes straight into your blood. It makes your blood sugar spike. It causes your body to produce insulin. And insulin not only reduces your blood sugar, but it accelerates the conversion of calories into fat. So you get this double whammy. You get all these calories that don't fill you up, and you're more likely to convert them into fat. And if you drink a lot of alcohol, you get a triple whammy because not only does the alcohol get converted into sugar, which then has the same problems, but the alcohol itself slows your metabolic rate, so you burn those calories more slowly. So I generally find that when people lose weight, if they start to gain it back, it's usually because they're starting to eat too much fat, too much oil, too much sugar, too much refined carbs.
You got it. So they're plant-based on paper, but they're eating refined and that right there. Small amounts of that, I think, contributes a significant weight gain, for sure.
So again, I'm so grateful to both of you for having me on. I would love to set up a date in early June to come back, and we'll just make the whole thing Q&A.
Perfect. That sounds like a plan. Thank you so much. If you're still here with us, can you please give Dr. Dean Ornish a big thank you? We know that there's a huge number of fans in our audience that absolutely adore you, your work, your philosophy, the way that you speak, and you provide it to so many people.
Well, I'd love it if you can get the book and buy it for your friends, because obviously, any author wants to sell books. But more than that, it sends a message to corporate America and to the publishers that this is what people want. And I've worked with some of the big food companies to get them to make better food. And, the fact that soft drink sales are down 40%, that's one of the great things about the free enterprise system is that over time, when enough people want something, it's like Margaret Mead said, that's how change happens, when a small number of committed people decide this is what they want to do. And it's our actions that really matter. And capitalist society, where you spend your money on really has an impact, for better and for worse. And so I'm really grateful for the chance to share this information with you. To me, awareness is always the first step in healing. And so your show is reaching so many people and empowering them with information. And I feel grateful to be part of it. So thank you.
You rock. You're the man. There's the thank yous are just flooding in. They're just coming in. And so
Thank you.
We'll catch you next. Sure.
Have a great evening. Okay, guys, we were just in the presence of a legend. That was so much fun. Anybody who's asked a question in the chat box, we are going to get to it. Cyrus and I will do our best to answer all the questions that came in. We'll also still do our call-in section, but like Dr. Runner said, hopefully we'll have another opportunity where we focus on Q&A. But before we get to that, Cyrus, we have another special offer for people who've joined the webinar.
This is correct. This is correct. Actually, before we even get to that, do you want to do one call-in? I absolutely love Q&As where somebody can get on the phone and you call someone. So if you would like to talk to Robbie and myself on the phone, if you have a burning question and you want to talk to us in person, drop your phone number into the chat box. We'll just choose the first phone number that we see. We'll call you, get you on the phone, have a quick little chat, and then we can move on.
Yeah, why don't we collect a bunch of numbers? We'll get in there. We'll run through this real quick, and then we'll do it after we've run through it.
Perfect.
So so it's on Slack, and we will. What we're gonna do here is, well, actually, you know what? Let's make a quick call. We'll put it on Cyrus's computer after the call, and then we're gonna call. I'm gonna call Deb. So Deb was the first person to put her number in here. Let me go here to my phone app. Okay, so we're gonna call plus new call. Here we go. Call from this number. 801 3329. Okay, Deb, coming in.
Coming in hot.
If the phone is too close to the mic, just let me know, guys, and I'll pull it back a little bit.
Hello, I'm so excited. I can't believe this.
Deb, it's great to be talking to you. You can turn the volume down on your computer.
Okay. Turn the volume down on your computer.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I think it's better now. You're good.
Okay. All right. Okay, cool. Hi.
It's great.
I'm excited to be speaking to you.
Fantastic. How can we help you?
You want me to ask?
Yeah, ask a question.
Okay, here's my question. My husband's been diabetic for 20 years, or 25 years about, so I know all about diabetes. So as we've been going plant-based and eating perfect, I just was curious and started checking my blood sugar. And my blood sugar, fasting blood sugar in the morning is about 100. And I don't know. I see so many conflicting stats on that, whether that's good, bad, or normal. It worries me because I keep thinking it should be around the 70. What do you guys know about that?
What was the blood pressure? Something?
She said that her fasting blood glucose is 100, and she thinks it should be 70.
Oh, got it. Okay. So Deb, this is Cyrus, and okay, back up here. What are you eating? A whole food, plant-based diet? Is that what you said? You're eating perfectly? Is that what that means?
Yes, we are. We've been since my husband watched John McMahon's series. We went vegan in December. So before that, I was eating no flour and sugar for the last 2 years, and so now we're eating vegan on top of no flour and sugar. And so I just was curious, and then was kind of concerned with how high it felt like it was high to me. And so I've been monitoring it for about a week or so. and it's around 100, 109, 113 every morning fasting. And then I check it during the day, and it's still around 194. I mean, it bounces back after I eat. So 3 hours after I eat, it's back up to around 100. So what do you think about that? I mean, I'm just wondering, am I pre-diabetes after all of this hard work doing everything Dr. Orange just taught us?
Yeah, okay. So this is a really good question because with a blood glucose of a fasting blood glucose of 100, 100 is sort of the threshold for between non-diabetic and pre-diabetic. And so people are told over and over again, if your blood glucose is 100 or 101 or a little bit higher, then you likely are living with pre-diabetes, and now it's time to make lifestyle change. That is technically a true statement as far as like the American Diabetes Association is concerned, but it also depends on what type of diet you are eating, okay? So if you're eating a diet that's highly processed, or a diet that's high in fat, or a diet that contains a lot of animal-based foods, and your blood glucose is, let's call it 105 in the fasting state, versus if you're eating a diet that is whole food plant-based and you have 105, they're two completely separate scenarios. They both have in common that you have the same fasting blood glucose. So you might jump to the same conclusion that, oh, looks like I have pre-diabetes. But in reality, on the plant-based approach, your phytochemical, antioxidant, vitamin, mineral, fiber, and water intake is way higher, way higher. And as a result of that, the micronutrients are actually protecting your arteries and protecting your liver and protecting your pancreas and your muscles from oxidative stress and oxidative damage. So again, you might have a higher than normal fasting blood glucose, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're at the same risk for the development of chronic diseases, okay? So as you may know, Robbie and I are huge proponents of a whole food plant-based diet, meaning, yes, vegan, sure, you can use that word if you want, but most importantly, completely devoid of all packaged and processed foods. So even if you find something that's like a burger at the grocery store that says that it's a vegan burger, it has, if it's undergone a significant amount of processing, it could have food additives, it could have added sugar inside of it, and technically still be vegan, even though it's a processed food. So number one, I would ask you to evaluate how many processed foods are truly in your diet. And then number two, Robbie and I are also huge advocates of reducing your total fat intake still, even if you are vegan, even if you are eating a whole food plant-based diet. Because what we have found, and what overall, close to 100 years of evidence-based research shows, is that the total amount of fat in your diet absolutely matters. And, just like Dr. Ornish said, we need to get away from this idea of arguing about fat versus carbohydrate. We agree. We absolutely agree. We're not here to tell you that we're the fat police, but we do want you to understand that small amounts of fat-rich foods, even if they're technically vegan, can go a long way in elevating your blood glucose. So do us a favor and evaluate how many packaged and processed foods are truly in your diet, and then actually measure your total fat intake in your diet. And once you have those answers, then come back to us and we can try and help you out and give you a better answer.
I got one more thing to add to that. Have you had an A1C test?
I haven't. That was my next question to you. I was kind of gathering all this data to give to my doctor and say, would you give me an A1C? Hopefully. That would be more definitive to know whether or not
Yes, that's going to be super important right here. But also, based on the things that Sarah said, like, do you think you're already doing them, or is there room for improvement?
Well, and it's funny because I have been following a food plan when I recently lost 60 pounds a year ago, and it was all pushing more fat. It was saying have more fat brain's healthy and heart healthy. You need to have more of the healthy fat. So I was eating more butter and more avocados and more olives. So it's so confusing because you get so many different messages from the experts. So that's something I can do differently, is to cut back on the fat, because I've been taught it was healthy to have more fat. Packaged foods, occasionally we might have some whole grain bread and an occasional whole grain pasta or something like that. So other than that, no, we make everything ourselves at home. We're following right now the 4th meal planner that John had on his site. So we're eating everything she's telling us to eat. So that's our meal plan now.
Okay. Well, basically what Cyrus said is the best thing to do. So do that, and I would suggest, utilizing our resources and staying in touch.
Also, Kylie posted in the chat box.
Wonderful.
There's a thing in the insulin resistance checklist. So check that out and go through that. Download that PDF. Read the article, watch the video, and follow that. And if you can answer and start to fill out that insulin resistance checklist, it might give you some more hints and some more clues as to whether or not you may be living with an underlying, you may be living with insulin resistance that could be elevating other aspects of your basal metabolism.
Now, where is that checklist?
You'll be able to click it in the chat box on the webinar, which is still on, unless you left it.
Scroll through the chat.
On the webinar.
You'll see it. It's like the third comment right now in the chat box.
Okay. Right now, I just see the ad for the book.
Maybe I'll take that down.
What's that?
That's all I see. I don't. Okay, now I see the chat box. Okay, so just go back up to the top.
Yes.
Yeah, you see it says insulin resistance checklist. Right?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I will do that.
Okay.
Thanks so much, you guys. Bless you.
Absolutely. You got it.
Okay. All right. You want to let's talk about this. Let's talk about some fun stuff here. All right. I'm gonna share my screen real quick.
Yeah. So again, guys, because you're part of this webinar, we're giving you an opportunity that nobody else has. So we're excited to tell you about our coaching program. So that's what we're going to talk about here. If you have read any of Dean Ornish's work, it's just, we're going to talk about how to put it into action. That's what this whole system is about. Again, maximizing your insulin sensitivity. That's what our coaching program does, right, Cyrus?
Absolutely. That's the name of the game. No questions asked.
All right. So look at the types of foods you get to eat on our program. I actually saw somebody asking in the chat box about, losing weight and being a little concerned about that. And here's the fun part. Even whether you're trying to gain weight or lose weight, you get to eat as much as you want of these extremely satisfying and calorie-dense green light foods. Lots of fruit, lots of potatoes, lots of rice, lots of beans. And I know we just heard from the caller, like people are confused. Like, oh, they're adding in these healthy fats. And a lot of times they're still limiting these foods. We cannot stress this enough. We cannot, and we're just excited to be able to help people through a coaching process to truly trust, to truly get over that hump. Yes, eat all the fruit you want, all the potatoes you want, all the rice you want, and see your blood glucose improve. That's what our coaching program is about. So, as you see, super colorful stuff here. Now, here's how the program works. In our coaching program, we give you 3 tools. We have a step-by-step online course, which is designed to walk you through the process of making lifestyle change. Easy, step-by-step, not overwhelming. That's the whole point, so you can stick to it and it can last for the long term. The second tool we have is a private community. Dr. Ornish, I was about to interrupt Dr. Ornish, but I thought that might not be respectful. So he was saying how spending too much time on Facebook is not good, and that is true. But if you're spending your time in the Mastering Diabetes Members Only community, I promise you that's only going to do nothing but support and help your health, okay? So we have a group on Facebook. We have a group outside of Facebook if you're not a Facebook user. But the whole point is it's a vibrant community. And we actually just published a testimonial with John Dill, who was a fan of Dean Ornish, learned about community, then got away from the community and saw his health diminish. Then he got in our Facebook group and his life changed through the community. And he talked about it in his interview. It's really powerful. We also have our coaches in there answering questions every 24 hours. Any question you have, we are there to answer it. So we also have twice monthly live Q&A calls. And this is where you get to talk to our coaching team in person. We have video and we answer questions and can go through whatever obstacles you are running into. That communication, we get to talk back and forth, is extremely valuable. And you also get to learn from others. That's the fun part about that. Now, we have an incredible team. We are super proud of our coaches. So Cyrus and myself, we're part of the team. Obviously, our experience with type 1 is very helpful with anybody using insulin, whether you're insulin dependent type 2, type 1.5, type 1. We can help out with that. Kylie Buckner, who has been in the chat box helping out tonight, the co-creator of the Mastering Diabetes Insulin Resistance Checklist, absolutely brilliant, registered nurse with over 20 years of experience. We are so happy to have her in the group. Adam Sudd is another coach in our program. This guy lost over 200 pounds. He was living with type 2 diabetes, depression, using all kinds of medications, and he's off them. Mark Ramirez, he was using 20 units of Lantus insulin, 2 diabetes medications, lost weight, feels the best he's ever felt. Type 2 diabetes is gone. He's another coach in our program. So you get to work with people who have experience and a lot of knowledge helping you through all the challenges that come up, which they do. It's simple, but it's not easy, and that's why we have a coaching program. So being part of the program, success is highly contagious. When you are around people who are succeeding and you're seeing posts day after day of people getting results, the same results that you want to, overcoming the same challenges that you have, it becomes contagious. It rubs off on you. And we are not kidding when we say there's a new testimonial every day. There's new positive results every day. And there's also people expressing their challenges every day. So you get that support. Now, what does this program cost? Now, if you price out the online course, again, we have spent our entire lives building this. All of our knowledge, everything is in there in a concise way that doesn't waste your time, so you can get what you need to get the results you're looking for. That's valued at $1,200. Then you look at the community aspect, the private Facebook group, the private teachable community. That's valued at $1,000. The members-only content, new recipes, new Facebook Lives. We do team fasting. You know, we do a group fast together for intermittent fasting. All that support valued at $1,500. Okay. Now you talk about the live Q&A calls where we're together twice a month answering questions. It's valued at $1,200. You add this all up, it's almost $5,000. But lucky for you, it's not going to cost you that much, and we have some special bonuses. So a lot of you have been asking for the replay in the chat box. We have done a number of incredible webinars. We've put together our most popular ones, most impactful ones, and they are available to you if you take advantage of the offer tonight. So this is a webinar bonus, $197 value. You get a webinar on heart disease, mastering stress, anxiety, and emotional eating, the ketogenic diet, which is so confusing. That webinar really opens up people's minds to why there's all this confusion. Cholesterol, AMLA, the insane superfood that can change your life, and we bust myths about blood glucose control. So you'll get access to that. Another bonus is food prep. This is a big issue in our fast-paced life, okay? How do you get your food prep? How do you make sure you're set up for success? We got 5 modules in here to help you prepare and make sure you can master food prep. So this is valued at $197. But the good news is you don't have to pay that much to get this incredible bonus. Now, we have a waiting list for our coaching program, and there are hundreds of people on that. But because you are on the webinar tonight, you have the opportunity all the way through. It's actually Friday. So it's going to be Friday of this week that you have a chance to bypass the wait list. So you can bypass the wait list and get these bonuses if you take advantage of our offer. So the entire coaching program, it's a yearly subscription. You get the entire thing, everything we just went over, for a total of $399. That's a little bit over $33 a month. We've been consistently told that our program is too cheap for what we're offering. We're told that by our members. We're told that by other doctors. We're told that by all kinds of advisors, that this, you guys, are just too cheap. So if you want to take advantage of this yearly subscription for $399, this is your chance to sign up. This is your chance to take advantage. We're lifting the wait list just for the people on this webinar who've attended and signed up. You get that opportunity. So I'll load a little button here, and you can make the decision to join us, and we'd love to help you out.
100%. Actually, Robbie, as you were talking about people telling us that it's too cheap, it's funny how often we hear that. Now, it's like one thing for, you know, your mom to tell you that, your dad to tell you that, or like, you know, trusted advisors, whatnot. But it's another thing when people in your coaching program are like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? Like, yeah, you changed my life. I lost 80 pounds. My A1C dropped by 6%. I don't have to go to the doctor anymore. I'm not on any oral medication. And what? Like, I used to pay more than that for one doctor's visit. And, I got a,
Because it didn't even help me solve my problem. I mean,
no, problem at all. Exactly. It only perpetuated it. I mean, how much does the guy to see your doctor, Robbie? You told me the other day it was some ridiculous.
$50 for a 15-minute appointment, and there's no ongoing support. There's no recipes. There's no modules. There's no twice monthly phone calls. It's just a doctor's appointment. And we also help connect people with medical doctors if they need that. So we do that through the coaching program when the time is right. So, and again, those appointments don't need to be so expensive either if you know what to do. So, yeah, it's fun. And like you said, people are saving this money on their medications. We are consistently seeing people stopping medications, especially with the cost of insulin right now. Some people are having to pay for that out of pocket. It's quite the savings.
100%, yeah. Especially with the cost of insulin. Like, we could do an entire presentation just on the cost of insulin. And in fact, wink, wink, we are going to be doing that real soon because we now have a partnership with a company that can actually help reduce the cost of insulin by as much as 50%. So we're going to be talking about that real soon. But point being is that as the cost of insulin rises, as the cost of medical care is rising, and as the medical system is just kind of continuing to spin out of control, unfortunately, put yourself in the right position and make sure that you're decreasing your risk for chronic disease. You're reversing any chronic disease that you currently may have been living with. And as a result of doing that, it's going to completely transform your health, and you're just going to save a lot of money. Very end of the story.
Absolutely. Do you want to go to the Q&A, Doc, and then we'll do some of those, and then do maybe another phone call, and then we'll wrap it up?
Let's do it. Okay.
Well, if somebody, unfortunately, Dr. Orange isn't here, but we'll send him an email after. Please tell Dr. Orange he saved me from bypass in 1999. I read his reversal book back then, and I've read all his books too. And thanks to him, I'm a meditator too. That's fantastic.
Beautiful.
Okay, let's see.
Okay, what are some of the questions here? We got, okay, in a review of your new book on Amazon, a man suggests science. There's science that indicates that plant-based Mediterranean and low-carb diets all reverse heart disease and other degenerative conditions because each one of these diets minimizes processed food and eliminates 80% of dietary salt, consequently. What do you think of his assertion? Okay, so it's actually funny that Leslie asked this question, and Leslie, this guy is correct to a certain extent. One of the things that we keep on saying over and over again is that there's a difference between short-term results and long-term results. And I think most people get confused when they see good short-term results, and they make the assumption that the long-term results are also going to continue, or that they will happen in the future. So if you look at scientific studies, a lot of the times a scientific study will be conducted for anything from like 10 weeks long to something like 3 months long. Those are sort of like typical durations of scientific studies. Some studies will push it out to a year. Some studies will push it out to 5 years, but it's a minority of all studies that go that long. So most studies will say, okay, we took 2 groups of people, group 1 over here, group 2 over here, and we fed group 1 the standard American diet with a bunch of junk and processed foods. And we fed group 2 the blank diet, the Whole30 diet, the American Diabetes Association diet, the Mastering Diabetes diet, the Dr. Dean Ornish diet, the Atkins diet. It doesn't matter. You take some diet and you apply it to the second group. And then you monitor their changes in biomarkers over the course of either 10 weeks to 2 months to 3 months. And then at the end, you basically say, okay, look, the people in the control group did this, and the people in the intervention group did this. And then you can compare and decide which one of those interventions is actually more effective. So if you look at a sort of like wide selection of the research, what you'll find is that regardless of the type of like diet or intervention that people go on, they see improvement. Okay, you can go on the Atkins diet and you are likely to lose a lot of weight. You can eat a paleo diet and you're likely to feel dramatically better, lose weight, drop your fasting blood glucose, and the list goes on. You can eat a low-fat diet and you'll get similar results. You can eat the Ornish diet and you'll get similar results. Okay, but again, in the short term, you get those results because you're eliminating pro-inflammatory foods and you're eating more anti-inflammatory foods. Okay? And that's generally a good thing. However, if you take this Polaroid snapshot in time and you say, okay, cool, this is what happens at 3 months. Awesome. But then you fast forward and you go to like 6 months or 12 months or 2 years in the future, okay, you don't see the same thing. You want to see the same thing, but most of the time, when you're consuming a diet that's, let's call it the ketogenic diet, or you call it the very low carbohydrate diet, the Atkins approach, okay, you might get really good results in the first 3 months, weight loss, reduced A1C, reduced blood pressure, reduced cholesterol, you name it. But then if you fast forward to 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, those changes don't stick. And in fact, a lot of those changes reverse themselves. So now you're in a situation where your A1C is starting to creep up. You're not losing weight anymore. You might be gaining weight. Your LDL cholesterol is high. Your blood pressure is high. And all of a sudden you say to yourself, well, wait a minute. How come it worked at 3 months, but it doesn't work now? And that's the thing. That's what happens. Okay. So if somebody's saying, you can reverse disease by following this diet, what's the next most important question is to say, over what period of time? And if the answer is 3 months, then great, you can reverse disease. But if the answer is 10 years, that's a true reversal of disease. Okay, that's a true improvement in your chronic disease risk. I'm saying the long-term matters. Most scientific studies don't take that into account. So I hope that answers your question.
Again, if Dean Ornish was here, you could talk about it, but there's only one diet that's been published in peer-reviewed research to show verified reversal of heart disease, and that's a plant-based, low-fat plant-based diet. So, okay. What else do we got here?
All right. We got one more question, I think. So it says here, is there anything to be gained? This is from Celeste. Is there anything to be gained from occasional, let's call it 2 days per week, plant-based ketogenic diet for cognitive benefits and production of ketones? I'm asking partly because ketones have been used by Dr. Dale Beredson when his patients are insulin resistant in their brain so that they'll have ketones for fuel. But perhaps it is just a temporary emergency type measure. Okay, so this is a phenomenal question. So first things first, not all ketogenic diets are created equal. So Dr. Dale Beredson has a very plant-strong ketogenic diet, but he does incorporate the use of oil. Okay, and as a result of that, there's a lot of people in the whole food plant-based community who don't like his protocol because of the fact that it has a lot of oil, and it can, we know the oil-based community understands that it could be pro-inflammatory. There are other ketogenic diets which are primarily animal-based, and those animal-based ketogenic diets do not behave the same way as a plant-based ketogenic diet. So when it comes to losing weight, lowering blood glucose, improving your blood pressure and your cholesterol, yes, a ketogenic diet that's primarily of plant origin or fully of plant origin will work. It absolutely will work. Going back to what I was just saying earlier, because it's a diet that tends to improve the quality of the food that you're eating and eliminate a lot of pro-inflammatory foods. That's a good thing. When it comes to the cognitive benefit of ketone bodies, I am personally somewhat skeptical of this body of research. Because yes, ketone bodies are designed to be an emergency backup fuel that your liver produces for your brain, specifically in times when carbohydrate is limited. It's not designed, the brain biochemistry is not designed to be, not designed to operate off of ketone bodies for long periods of time. One thing that I would urge you to think a little bit more about, and one thing that I am currently learning a lot about here is let me back up here. What the plant-based ketogenic world likes to argue is they say, look, your brain is insulin resistant, so feed your brain a diet that doesn't require insulin, aka a ketogenic diet. Okay. What Robbie and I are saying, and what a lot of advocates in the sort of low-fat plant-based whole food world say, is if your brain is insulin resistant, make your brain insulin sensitive. Don't operate under the assumption that just because your brain is insulin resistant, that it's going to stay insulin resistant the rest of your life. Okay, your brain is as changeable of an organ as is your liver, as is your muscle, as is your pancreas. So if you're just saying, well, I have an insulin resistant brain because I've been eating a highly processed diet my entire life, what we would say is make your brain insulin sensitive. There's only one approach. There's only one approach that's been shown over and over and over again to maximize your insulin sensitivity, and that is by reducing your total fat intake and eating as many plant-based foods as humanly possible. If you do the opposite, raise your total fat intake, but eat a plant-based diet, then sure, you might operate in the ketogenic zone, but you're not benefiting your brain. You're not reversing the underlying insulin resistance that currently exists in your brain. And as a result of that, you could just be prolonging the agony before dementia and or Alzheimer's or cognitive decline sets in once again.
They're making the problem worse, Cyrus.
100%.
It's unbelievable.
It's there's a lot of confusion in this world of ketogenic diets. So I will say this: an animal-based ketogenic diet is definitely known to be the most problematic of diets in the long term. There's no question about that. A plant-based ketogenic diet is much, much safer. No question about it, much safer. But a low-fat plant-based whole food diet is much, much, much safer than that in our professional opinion. And again, there's going to be a lot of people who will debate us on this topic, and that's fine. But based off of the research and what we've seen so far, it seems that maximizing your insulin sensitivity is something that you just can't go wrong. You just cannot go wrong by doing that, period. There's no biological function that I know of, no organ that I know of that doesn't benefit from more insulin sensitivity, period, end of story.
There you have it. I saw somebody ask in the chat box, does Robbie still use a Dexcom? Yes, I use a Dexcom G6. I'm a big fan of it. If somebody can, your insurance will cover it and it's affordable, it can be an excellent tool. It's not required. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a better A1C or anything, but it can enhance your quality of life. So try it out if it's a possibility. Should we do one more phone call, Cyrus?
Sure, let's do one last phone call and then we'll call it a day.
Okay, one last phone call. So I had a number from Gary. We're going to try and reach Gary if he's still with us. The other number was an international one. I'm not sure I can dial that properly.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
510. You calling Gary right now?
Yep, 510-816.
424. Gary, calling from the East Bay. I bet you he's in. I'm gonna hazard a guess. He's in Berkeley. Let's find out. He's either in Berkeley or Oakland.
Hey guys, very, very good.
Gary, it's nice to be speaking with you. Make sure to turn the volume down on your computer.
Okay, let me turn it back down. Well, I'm actually in Marin, but I fooled you.
Great.
Okay. Make sure to turn the volume down on your computer. I did. How is it now?
I think it's going to be, I don't know if you did turn the volume down yet. Can you turn it to 0?
Walk away from this computer.
I'm in another room now. So
Okay, you're doing better now. Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of you guys. Thanks so much for the work that you're doing. It's just so enlightening because there's so much confusion out there. So, I guess one of my questions is, so I'm trying to reverse arterial sclerosis. I had a bypass about 10 years ago. I've been on a mostly vegan diet, plant-based diet, mostly because of you guys for the last, 9 months. And I'm not 100% in terms of super, super low fat, but I'm getting there. but I guess my question is, are there certain situations where doing statins are indeed warranted, or is that never really a good option?
Okay, so are there certain situations in which eating a higher fat diet can be more beneficial?
No, he's asking, are there certain situations where statins are warranted? And the answer is yes.
Yes, 100%.
And just to, for anybody listening here, to get a little bit more information on this topic in particular, I suggest going to the Nutrition Rounds podcast that Dr. Danielle Bellardo recently did with Rob Ostfeld. That is a fantastic episode from two practicing cardiologists who truly understand all of the science, all of the suggestions from the key organizations and the medicines and how they work.
Okay.
And they give very detailed information on this topic.
Okay, and Robbie, can you please put their name in the chat box so we can see?
Yeah, we'll get that. We'll get that in the chat box before the evening is over, for sure.
Okay, cool.
But before you go, I want to ask one question. What is the challenge with lowering the fat? Like, what is the one food right now or the one meal that is holding you back?
Oh, that's a great question. I love avocados.
Okay.
And so I mostly do a lot of stir fry. I do more and more do steamed, but I like the flavor of, sauteed vegetables. I use a lot less oil than I used to for meeting you guys.
Okay.
So I don't do as many. I'd say that I reduced significantly. I'm not measuring yet or weighing. Like, I can't tell you percentage-wise where I am, but I know that I've lost 12 pounds.
Okay, and, that's great.
And I don't eat as much. I wait to get hungry in the morning. My biggest challenge, guys, is how to get rid of most oil. What do I do about bread in the morning? Normally, I love avocado on there, and I have not been able to find replacement for half and half in my coffee. They're my main struggle. So that's it.
Okay. Well, you know where to start. So I think the key here is to learn how to, I would take it one step at a time. Pick one of the vices and master it. So learn and practice and do some flavor testing and learn how to cook without oil. You can definitely do it.
Okay.
Gary, that's going to be one of the best things you ever do for yourself.
Do you guys have a video on that?
We'll paste a few things in the chat box to give you some tips. But honestly, this is also, part of being involved with the coaching program is like we get to interact with you. Okay, hey, I tried this, it didn't work. Okay, try this recipe by this expert. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like the nitty-gritty nuances of why we have a coaching program. But we'll put a few options in the chat box and start there and really master that and then move on, all right?
Okay.
All right, Gary, thank you so much. You're doing great. Congratulations on your progress.
Hey, thanks, guys. Take care.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
All right, there you have it.
Look at that. One day we're going to do a webinar where we're just doing nothing but phone calls. I can't wait.
Okay, great.
That'd be fun.
I'm just going to pop this in the chat box, little forks over knives, tips right here. Start there. And you got this, Gary.
All right. So thanks for joining us today. It looks like there's still 197 people in the room, which is always cool to see. There's two things to take care of. Number one, if you haven't purchased Dr. Ornish's book at some point, or at least had a chance to read it, get the audio book, get the Kindle version, something like that. Highly recommend it. Dr. Ornish is we should be honored to be living in a time where someone that smart and someone that caring exists. I used to tell myself when I was a kid that I used to watch Bulls basketball, and I used to watch Michael Jordan play. And I thought to myself at a young age, wow, is it true that this guy actually lives right now? He's literally one of the best athletes in the world to have ever existed. And I get to sit here and watch him play live. Like, what an incredible experience, right? I kind of feel like Dr. Ornish is similar to that. You know, his basketball skills may need a little bit of work, but he is the Michael Jordan of lifestyle medicine. He's one of them, and the opportunity to like learn from him in person, ask him a question, read his book is something that future generations are going to look back on and be like, wow, that Dr. Ornish was really a smart guy. I wish he was alive now, right? So take advantage of this opportunity. It's really, 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 it's a very special opportunity. And then secondarily, if you're interested in joining the Mastering Diabetes coaching program, again, just like Robbie was saying, you can skip the wait list right now. We'll also give you close to $400 in free bonuses for joining. The program is just fun. It's just real fun. It gets incredible results. If you're tired and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, let's change that. Let's change that immediately. Join the coaching program now. You can get these bonuses free up until Friday at 11:59 p.m. After that, it's going to go away, and we're going to institute the waiting list one more time.
It's like what Kylie said. It's like buy one, get one.
That's right. Yeah, it's like buy one, get one free.
Yeah.
Boom. We'll see you next time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great day, great evening, and we'll catch you on the flip side.